Being a good orator is not a skill for everyone. Or is it? We speak today to someone who, to put it rather simply, is a public speaking savant. Glen Savage is a distinguished Toastmaster, the highest level one could attain in Toastmasters International. Let's hear him speak about speaking in this interview with the British Herald. Hello, Glen. It's great to be speaking with you today.
Morning, Neha. Nice to be here.
Thank you. So let's just start off with what I said in my intro. Can everyone be a good orator? And before you answer that, I just want to, include something that I've learned over my time as a Toastmaster. Over to you.
Yeah, I think anyone can be a good orator. It's about, for me, it's thinking about what do you want to say and how will it be of use to the audience? And everybody has life experiences and knowledge and ideas and strategies. And it's about thinking, what have I got that would be useful to this audience?
So when was it that you started public speaking? Was it simply because you wanted to try out something new, or did you realize that you needed to upskill to include public speaking in, your set of skills? I'd love to know.
But my original public speaking journey came when I decided to become a scuba diving instructor. And then I learned as a scuba diving instructor, it wasn't all about swimming underwater with the fish. Actually, you had to teach your students skills and some of the physics and theory of scuba diving so they stayed safe and didn't hurt themselves. So it was kind of thrust upon me, going from a hobby and a sport to suddenly I needed to stand up and speak. And the journey which was something at the time I dreaded and didn't want to do. And I think that went all the way back to the end of my first year in school, when the class was putting on a play for all the parents to come in and watch, and we were doing some nativity play, and I was the Archangel Gabriel, and all I had to do was come out and open the show by saying, "Come here, baby angels," and I was absolutely terrified. And like many people, when it comes to speaking, they have either some foundation of fear or inexplicable anxiety about it, which can be overcome because the value of what you share with the audience is more important than how you feel about yourself. And I went from there, and then later on I got involved in Toastmasters. And as you know, Toastmasters is a wonderful organization that provide a safe environment for people to practice and experiment with speaking. And then whatever you do, good, bad or ugly, you get some useful and helpful feedback on it. And I think that is the whole secret to being a good public speaker or orator, is actually get up and speak and then get some useful feedback. The old saying about, if you want to be a good baker, bake, bake, bake. If you want to be a good dancer, dance, dance, dance. If you want to be a good speaker, speak, speak, speak. And seize every opportunity that you get to just get up and speak, even if it's just answering a simple question. A Monday morning, somebody says, "What did you get up to on the weekend?" It's the speaking opportunity. But we don't see those sorts of conversation situations as speaking opportunities. We tend to think of it more as, well, a formal presentation is public speaking, but there's a lot more simple public speaking.
So you just got into the Toastmasters. Let's talk a little more about Toastmasters. Would love it if you could add a note about the different levels of speakers that you all have as well, like how you get to the next level. I'd love if you could include a note on that.
Sure. Well, I think when you join, there is a structured system that Toastmasters have, and they now have a new system called Pathways, and they have 5 levels, and within each level there are a number of speaking projects that you must complete. And for each speaking project you get feedback, and you take that feedback on board and you use that when you develop your next speech or presentation. And then progressively you work up through the levels and then almost by magic, you may not even notice how your confidence and how your flow improves, and how you even emphasize your words, the clarity of your speech. It all just keeps progressing. It's a bit like the old saying about the journey of 1,000 miles starts with a single step.
That's nice. That's great. So can you tell me probably what was the topic of your speech that sort of qualified you to become a DTM?
Oh, I'd have to think about that. That's going back a way now. I think it was something around...
Yeah, that's great. But what was probably then your most memorable speech that you've given with the Toastmasters?
Oh, there's been so many really enjoyable speeches I've given. Most memorable speeches are probably humorous speeches that have a message in them. And because one of the things I believe is that whatever your message, whatever your speech is about, injecting a little bit of humor can just bring it more to life and make it a little bit more memorable.
Okay.
So if I think about a holiday I had to Japan,
Okay.
and I arrived and they asked me, where is your visa?
Mm-hmm.
And I said, oh, I don't need a visa. And they said, you do need a visa. And I said, the travel agent told me I didn't. And I produced this piece of paper that said, visa requirement none. To which she said, that is very regrettable.
Okay.
At which point I was then surrounded by 3 men in grey uniforms with guns and corralled into a back room with the grey walls and sat on a bench. And they were very, very polite. And they were saying, oh, we are so sorry, but we have to deport you. and it was just, I was the one at fault, but they were the ones apologizing. And but then it went on and they say, but we understand that you must be tired after your journey. So we allow you 72 hours to rest up in a local place before we deport you. So little things like that. It's all situational, about personal experiences. What can you learn from that? And a simple little message about always double check the visa requirements.
Very true.
But the humorous story really brings it home. As opposed to if you say to somebody, before you travel, make sure you check the visa requirements, can actually sound quite patronizing. And people can think, well, that's pretty obvious, isn't it? Of course I would check. But if you tell a story that brings the point to life, then people accept it and remember it.
Very true. Very nice. Yeah, I'm smiling. I found that story so cute. Yeah. So what do you think is the greatest thing that a person can do with their words? Because a lot of what you're doing is, playing with words. So what's the greatest thing that someone can do with words?
I think that there are 3 areas where you can use your words: to inform, to inspire, or to influence. And they're the 3 things where it comes back to think about the audience. Who's the audience? What have I got that would be of value or use or interest to them? Do I want to share some information? Do I want to inspire them to go off and consider other options? Or do I want to influence them to take on board a particular principle or idea? And then from there, you can craft your words. But it's thinking about what's the outcome? What do I want to achieve? And more particularly, how will it benefit this audience?
So what do you think when it comes to a speech? What is more important, the script or how it is being delivered?
Well, I do think they're both important. I always think about the triangle of communication. There's the content, then there's putting it into a structure, and then there's the delivery of it. And for a great speech, you have to have all three in place. Otherwise, it's unbalanced, and it may come across less meaningfully or less powerfully, and certainly less memorably to the audience. But I think it's all about starting with what's the message, and then expanding from there, and then everything in the speech should support the message, rather than just random comments or somebody thinking, oh, I've got this great quote, I'm going to shoehorn it into this speech. It's completely unrelated, but I love this quote and I'm going to shoehorn it in. So it's thinking about everything you do or say, make it relevant and link up. And then once you've got the content, putting it into some sort of structure that flows so the audience can follow you. And then the delivery, that's where you get the real opportunity to engage and connect with the audience, and bring it to life.
Right. That's great. Yeah, so how long on average does it take for you to work on a speech? Like getting the idea, its research, the script, the practice, probably all of it. How long does it take you?
It depends on whether it's me solely coming up with the speech, or whether somebody asks me to deliver a talk on a particular subject. So if somebody asks me to deliver a particular talk, then my formula is to start with a series of questions like, okay, who will the audience be? What do they know already? Why this topic? Why now? To get some idea of the importance and what it needs to achieve. And from there, it's a case of putting down some thoughts, playing around with them, and then deciding on what you'll use. Now, one of the qualifying criteria is how long have I got? If somebody says that I'd like you to do a presentation at this conference, and you've got a year's notice, then that's great. You've got a load of time to play around. If somebody says, I'd like you to give this talk tomorrow morning, then you don't have the luxury. So you need to focus yourself a lot more stringently and strictly. But with my own topics that I come up with, sometimes an idea just comes from the ether. And I think, or I might hear somebody speaking and come out with one line that I think, yeah, that's a really interesting subject. I could do something with that, or I'd like to do something with that. And perhaps I know an audience who would be interested in that. I think you can put a good speech together in a day. But then in relation to the delivery, well, depending upon how long the speech will be. So in a typical Toastmasters format, a 5 to 7 minute speech is very different to a conference where they ask you to talk for an hour. But naturally, there should be some time respect for the length of the speech. So if somebody's going to ask you to talk for an hour and they give you a day's notice, then they can have very little expectation, unless it's a topic that you've spoken about before. I think for a 5 to 7 minute speech, sometimes people are much better if they don't have too long to think about it. Sometimes it's nice to be able to create the speech, let it simmer on the back burner, and play around with it for a while, which is what I love to do. I have a thought or an idea, I put something down, and I just let it rest, and then over time, more ideas come to me, and they get added to that, and then it gets crafted and woven into a final product.
So I'd love to know, like, how many drafts do you have right now of these little ideas that you're working on?
I have a folder with quite a few, probably about 20.
Oh, okay. Wow. So 20 more speeches in work. Wow. Very nice.
Well, I mean, sometimes I'll come up with a thought or an idea and put down some content, and I think I don't know where, when, or why I will use this speech, but an opportunity will present itself where I will think, that speech will be useful for this audience. Okay. So it's good to put ideas down as you come to them.
So what category with, the different speech types in Toastmasters is your favorite? Is it like the humorous speeches or the inspirational, the normal, general speaking, or is it, evaluation, table topics, round robin? Like, which one's your favorite?
I think, firstly, let me say it is very important for each speaker's development to do a mixture of all of them. Because if you only specialize in doing speeches, then once again, your development becomes a little bit unbalanced or biased. Doing things like table topics that force you to think on your feet in the moment are very, very good to stimulate creativity, but also stimulate just being in the moment and holding the space. Even if you dry up a bit, just to stand there, breathe and be calm, and then something else will come. Evaluations are great because they really improve your ability to listen and to analyze and to consider what other people are saying, and then to structure some sort of useful and constructive feedback. And then naturally the speeches, you have an open slate to talk about things you'd like to talk about. So I recently gave a talk where it was all about a children's story, which got me thinking about when we were young, our parents read us bedtime stories, and they were great. And then maybe we've read bedtime stories to our own children or other friends' children, and they've loved it. And it got me thinking about, can an adult learn something from a children's story? So I told this children's story that wasn't so well known, and then basically highlighted how it was a metaphor for how you deal with life, and got the audience thinking about, when something goes wrong, don't panic, think about what resources do I have, and it went down a real treat. But it was something different. For me, there's thinking about, can I do something a little bit different that's engaging, entertaining, but will be of benefit to the audience?
So there's this rather common and very funny narrative people, an advice that's given to people who are trying to get over their fear of public speaking, the one where they should, visualize their entire audience in their underwear. Personally speaking, I'd find that really intimidating. But what are your thoughts on this? And if you had to sort of reframe this concept, what would your recommendation be instead?
That saying in its many forms has been around a long time. And I think that the value in that saying is it's designed to make the speaker laugh, take a deep breath, and just relax them in the moment, because it's such a crazy, ridiculous statement. And as you've said, you don't really want to imagine your audience in their underwear, and probably no one else does either. But it's so ridiculous and an exaggerated concept that it just helps to make you laugh and relax. And I think that's the key point. Something that helps you come out in front of the audience, just get grounded and comfortable before you start. And really, in your own mind, you can get out there and say anything ridiculous. For example, you can stand in front of the audience and just think, you lucky people getting to listen to me. because that's so ridiculous, it kind of makes you laugh. Or you can even think, I wonder which one will be the last one to fall asleep. You can say anything in your own mind, just to put you in the moment and focus on the audience. Because the key for me is to focus on the audience, not yourself. So ideas like, oh, I hope they like me. Yes, sure, we all hope the audience like us, but actually, whether they like you or not is irrelevant. What's important is whether they get the message or get something of value from you. If they like you, that's a bonus. But it's taking the focus from inward focus about, oh, I'm feeling anxious, I'm feeling nervous, to an outward focus on the audience helps to distract attention from any speaking anxiety and think, this audience is what's important. What I have to share with them is important. Let's go.
Amazing. Yeah, that's great advice. I think everyone should, probably listen to that and inculcate that. That's wonderful. So since you spoke about the audience, I'd love to just flow into my next question from there. So do you think that it is actually possible to get the attention of every single member of the audience? Because what would you do? It probably has already happened. So what do you do if midway through a speech you realize that the audience seems really disinterested or or they seem just disinterested in general? What do you do?
So one thing I would say is, don't over mind read the audience. For example, if you're standing there thinking, oh, that person in the front row looks really bored, actually, they might be really thinking about what you just said. But in really thinking, they can look detached and disengaged. So as far as the value of the message is concerned, it's really important not to misread or mismind read the audience and put yourself off. Now, one trick I use is, because it's important to keep your own state up and healthy. So one of the things I do is have a look around the audience, as you should do anyway, to have that eye contact. Find a few people spread around the audience who look engaged, and keep looking at them to re-energize yourself. That's one tip I would share. And the other thing is, if they're looking a bit disengaged, do something different to shake it up a bit. Ask the audience a question and get them involved, so that they're actually doing something. Or you can use a bit of humor, slow it down, speed it up, use a lot of vocal variety, all those tools that we learn in Toastmasters and elsewhere that can be valuable. All those things we learn early on along the way, which also are so easy to forget about.
Very true. Yeah, I mean, so just going from your tip there, so how much percentage of your speeches are actually unscripted? Where do you just go off tangent just to sort of get the audience interested? How much percentage of your speech is that?
That once again, that depends upon how much time you have. So for example, if you've got 7 minutes and your speech is 6.5 minutes worth, then you think, well, I've got 30 seconds. If I wish to ad-lib or engage and interact with the audience, and if I do that, I need to have a way to regain control and disconnect from them so I can move on. And in a larger time frame, you've got a lot more scope to be in the moment and ad-lib and interact. And actually, I think, personally, I love to interact with the audience. Even in a 7-minute talk, I don't wish to get up there and just talk for 7 minutes. I want to get them involved. If I'm using a quote that I repeat throughout the talk, then by the third time, I get the audience to finish the sentence. Or by the end, I may get them to do the whole quote. Because not only does that get them interactive and involved, but actually they remember the strap line because they've been saying it themselves. But yeah, I think for me, audience interaction is really quite key.
Okay, interesting.
If you're talking about even something as simple as if I was going to talk about a scuba diving experience that I had, then I could just talk about the scuba diving experience. But what I would do is ask the audience, how many of you have been scuba diving? Because that gives me more insight into my audience. And if they've all been scuba diving, then that allows me to say some things that I know they'll understand. If none of them have been scuba diving, then I may need to put in some things that explain a few things to make it more relevant and understandable. But I think it's important to find out what your audience know and what they don't know and what their experience is.
Right. That's great. I mean, this is now off the record. I'm just not for the video, but I used to be in Gavel Club a really long time back. That's the younger version of Toastmasters, I believe.
Yeah.
So, in that, I remember one of the speeches I gave to sort of get audience interaction was, I taught people how to count from 1 to 10 in Japanese. And they did that. It was really nice. It was talking about learning methods. And this was one of them. So I just remembered that the second you said this to involve the audience. And I won for that speech. It was a normal club level contest, but I'd won for that. So that's why I remember that very clearly.
Well, I think something like that, where there's something different, something quite unique, and therefore it's memorable, is great. And I know the. Do you know the exercise, the plank, where?
Yeah.
So I did a speech one night called Plonk, Plink, Plank.
Okay.
And it was all about the health benefits of the plank. And I'd set a table up out the front of the room before the meeting. About a third of the way through, shoes off, up onto the table, and I got into the plank position. And for the next minute, I carried on speaking to the audience whilst just holding a plank.
Wow.
And a bit, well, so at the end of the speech, I left them a challenge. Over the next 10 days, try this, 30 seconds a day, and notice the difference in the way you feel. And that was it. The number of emails I got 10 days later to say, I've been doing that plank.
Okay.
And I thought, really? So you never know the impact that something you do may have. Now, I suspect if I hadn't got up on the table and done it, then nothing might have happened. But it was so unexpected. So there's something about the element of surprise, which is also the foundation of all humour, that grabbed people. And 5 years later, people come up to me and say, I remember that speech you did doing the plank on the table. People remember something 5 years later, then you think, actually, it was worth doing.
Correct. Yeah, that's probably, I mean, I would assume that that's one of your best speeches to date. Did you win that day?
Probably.
Okay, nice. So, yes. What do you think is probably the toughest question that someone could ask you?
About speaking or in life in general?
I mean, about speaking, but in life in general works too.
What is the toughest question somebody might ask me?
Yeah, it's like a round robin. No, this is a table topic question for you.
Oh, I see. The toughest question. Oh, the toughest question is probably, can you tell me this Saturday's winning lottery numbers?
Okay, that's a good one. So can you tell me this Saturday's winning lottery numbers?
I can tell you this Saturday's winning lottery numbers, but the thing is, the risk is, if you use them and then you win millions of pounds and then your name gets released, then you'll be hounded by all these people wanting donations and your life will become a living misery. And you might think, I wished I'd never won that money.
Great.
Alternatively, you could share the numbers with loads of people so that instead of winning millions, you only win at £200 each.
Nice. Very nice. So what has probably been the best speech that you've heard? It could be from anyone. It could be probably another club member or, some very famous person. What's the best speech you've heard to date?
One of my favorite speeches was, I may get the year wrong, about 2013, the World Championship of Public Speaking, when Presian Vasilev did his My Life Was Changed by a Tire.
Okay.
And he stood up and talked about getting a flat tire, getting this jacking the car up whilst making squeaking sound. And he talked about, it was quite humorous, told this story, and it had a powerful message to it.
Okay.
And I think for me, that really stands out in my memory, because he ends up talking about that night, I thought I was changing a tire. Turns out a tire changed me.
Yes.
But having said that, I've also heard some people deliver their first icebreaker speech, have told about a personal story and just got lost in the personal story. And it's been very memorable as well. So I think it's just about a topic, a subject, or a story that touches people,
Right.
or people can identify with. And for me, if there's some humor woven in, it just lifts it and makes it more memorable.
Very true. That's nice. How do you usually navigate giving speeches on, topics that could be tricky or sensitive? Do you have any tips for that?
Yes, I make a list about, this is a personal thing, I make a list about all the things that could possibly go wrong. So all the people I could offend and why. So then that gives me some guidelines about the tread carefully areas or the no-go zones, and to keep it maybe straighter, simpler, broad spectrum that will appeal to everybody, and then craft the content from there.
If there's someone giving a speech online, so that's very different from addressing an audience in person. So do you have any tips on how to make that work? It's impossible to get that sort of visual feedback from the audience as you would when on stage. So do you have any tips, probably how to maintain eye contact, what your body language should be like, what you should do in general?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things. One is when you're presenting online, whether people have their cameras on or off. As you know, in a Toastmasters contest online, you've just got a wall of black, except maybe the contest chair. But if you've got faces there, then you've got this wall of audience members, and it's, whilst you can't hear them, there is an element of imagining them reacting. But you can still get them raising hands. You can still ask questions and get them nodding. You can still see them being a bit animated if you say something funny. If you say something funny and people are moving, then you know that they're still interacting with you, even though you may not be able to hear them. And I think that's really important, to run with that idea of they are there with you. They want to hear what you've got to say. They want to benefit from your experience, and just be positive. So there really is something for the speaker about personal state management. Get yourself in a good state, be in the moment, and just really connect with these people. Even if you've got a black wall with everybody's camera turned off, just imagine you are speaking to them. I know some speakers up on the wall behind their computer have a picture of an audience.
Oh.
And if there's a black screen, they'll just look just over the top of the camera and talk to this audience in the picture. So they've still got that engagement.
Very nice. So over the course of this entire conversation, you've sort of given us so many tips. So I'm going to probably get to the end by asking you for 3 tips for novice public speakers who want to give it a go.
Okay. I would say, firstly, just have a go. And just have a go. Whatever happens, happens. Nobody goes from 0 to superb in one talk. Nobody, including world champions. I can remember hearing Craig Valentine talk about his first professional speech, and him saying they were paying him $3,000, and I gave them a $150 speech. And he said it's the most powerful lesson that he learned. And there was something that made him remember, deliver value. So the first thing is, get up there, have a go. It's all about the audience. Just have a conversation with the audience. Just talk to them. You don't need to think about, I've got to make this incredibly complicated, clever presentation. Just have a conversation with the audience and engage with them. And whatever you do, give them something of value. And the other thing I would say is, when you first get out the front of the room, I say to people, what's the first thing you're going to do when you get out the front of the room? And they say, start speaking. And I say, no, that's the last thing you want to do. So when you get out the front of the room, you just want to breathe in. Nice deep breath, because whilst you're breathing in, you can't speak. A nice deep breath, just casually look around the audience and make eye contact and smile. And then you can start speaking, because by that time, you've made them curious what you're going to say. They unconsciously lean in a little bit towards you. And then you've got unconscious engagement before you've even said a word. I think there is one more tip I would certainly share, and that is when you're speaking to the audience, look like you're enjoying it. Have fun and make sure you enjoy it, because when you look like you're enjoying it, you make it so much easier for the audience to enjoy listening to you. If you stand up there looking uptight or bored yourself, then don't be surprised if the audience get a bit bored and disconnected. But just be in the moment, have fun, enjoy it. It's a wonderful opportunity. It's a great privilege to be able to speak to an audience and share a message with them. And I think that's important to remember. There was one thing, when people say, I can't think of anything to talk about, which people often do, or what will I talk about? there is a massive number of things that you can talk about, and a number of different styles that you can use. Something that made you laugh, you can talk about that. Something that upset you, you can talk about that. A holiday where something went wrong, where you learned something, you can talk about that. You can talk about so many different things. And often people will say, oh, I thought about talking about this subject, but nobody will be interested in that. And my question is, how do you know? If you make it, if you have a subject and there's a message or a learning or an experience, then people will learn something from it. They say the world's most powerful influencing tool is your voice. Mm-hmm. So if we think about what we say and how we say it and how it will benefit the audience, then that can go a long way. So
Glenn, it was so great speaking to you again, and I really had fun, and I love the stories.
Thank you very much, Neha.
Have a great day.
All right then. Cheers now. Bye.